Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to give everybody a moment to come into the room. Oh, there's Morgan. Okay, I'm going to promote that panelist. Okay, good evening. Hello, everybody. My name is Sabrina Krejci. I am a BIFF staff member. I will kind of be in the backgrounds here. We have Lindsay Mitchell, who will be our moderator. And we have some amazing filmmakers from 3 different films tonight. We have representatives from The Road Up, Burn Girl, and Big Scary S Word. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor for our Q&A sessions, Culver's. We love their food and we love the commitment to BIFF and all these years. For our people that are watching here, either in Zoom or on Facebook, if you're here in Zoom, you can put your question into the Q&A box, or you can use the chat field. The other option would be to raise your hand and I can unmute you in an appropriate place then you can ask the filmmakers questions directly. If you're watching on Facebook, please go ahead and drop any of your questions in the comments and we will make sure we get them over to our filmmakers to answer during the broadcast. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start off by showing some trailers. The first trailer that I'm going to show today is going to be for the Big Scary S Word. So hold on one second.
We could begin with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, written by a democratic socialist. Walt Whitman, Martin Luther King Jr., Albert Einstein, socialist to the core. Socialism is as American as apple pie.
Most socialists begin with a critique of inequality.
Basic human rights need to be provided for.
Teachers are buying supplies out of our own pockets. I can't cover my basic expenses.
I decided to run for office. I saw what can happen when the systems that are designed to protect working people fail us.
Society changes when people who otherwise don't have power stand up.
5 individuals own more wealth than the entire bottom half of the human population.
There is an outrage on the part of the people, Mr. Chairman, that is not necessarily perceived here in Congress.
We believe in democracy. The problem with the word socialism is that it's been equated with totalitarianism.
I'm 30. I was born in '87. I don't remember the Berlin Wall falling. The Red Scare, anybody who uses the big scary S word is automatically Stalin. It doesn't work anymore.
We've got thousands of teachers who've come to this building demanding answers.
When you can't do your job without having to have a second job, which I have, to pay the bills, that's bullshit.
Democratic socialism is the value that in a modern, moral, and wealthy society, no person in America should be too poor to live.
Our job is to change the world in the United States of America.
It's possible to design a society and economy based on people's most pressing needs.
More voice from the workers actually benefits the company.
Yes.
Socialism is really, at heart, the ultimate expression of democracy.
If that's not American, I don't know what is.
Great. And our next one, move my screen here, would be the trailer for Burn Girl.
Well, Rita, as you know, we're here in Galway today. We're on a very special mission because if you just look over the way across the river there, we're headed to the Galway City Museum. And in there, they've got a very special, the newest exhibition called Keepers of the Gale. And that has a lot to do with us and our ancestry.
Who are my people? Where is my homeland? I began a search for the place and people my grandma left behind. I hoped that by learning about her life, I could understand something important about mine. My search landed me in the Burren, a wild, beautiful, windswept place where my clan, the Daverns, lived and farmed for over 1,200 years.
I can still remember the day that you arrived the door here, and with a look of astonishment on your face because you expected a ruin 400 years old, I believe. Your great-grandfather was born here.
I've had this bug, I think, that came from growing up and knowing nothing about Ireland or the Burren or my family. None of it got passed down. This is my grandmother, Ann Davern's house that she was born in 1868. 19 years of education and not one day of Irish history.
There is such a wealth of archaeology going back 5,000 years.
When Cromwell came, the 17th century, he destroyed every single thing he came upon. And all the Daverns were scattered all over the place.
It's vitally important that you always know where you've come from. And it doesn't matter what your history has been, whether it's shadowy or bright and sparkling, you should always know where you've come from.
The O'Daverns were but one small clan on the west coast of an island halfway across the world from where I was born. But by reclaiming this family story and sharing it with upcoming generations, we are preserving a heritage that could easily have been lost forever.
And our last trailer will be for the Road Up.
It's like, please check your firearms at this point. Does it say that really?
I always cared at least a little bit about everything. And something just snapped in my head and I didn't give a shit about anything.
I'm interested in the customer service position.
Yeah, I made a mistake, but it's not gonna happen again. Maybe something else might happen, but not that one.
I need some work experience, so I'm willing to do just about anything, not too degrading, but I do something to get me back into the workforce.
Good morning. Good morning. What's the latest and the greatest?
I would never think to try a job training program. I know how to work.
Say I don't want to go. Say you don't want to go. Say you don't want to go. Say you don't want to go. Sit your ass down.
If you don't come here because you truly want to change your life, it's not going to work.
I am worthy of the best that life has to offer. I don't care how many mistakes I made.
It's hard as hell. But if we know that, who in the hell want to do it by their damn self?
Anything that is worth obtaining takes hard work, and this is the work. I mean, I feel good about today. So, I don't know.
All we're doing is selling hope. I can't get you to the next step. I cannot feed that little glimmer of hope that got you to get up out the bed in the first place. Without hope, there's nothing.
Lift me up, lift me up, lift me up, lift me up.
Throw your head back and say it again. I am worthy of the best that life has to offer.
I know you love me.
Thank you for those. Lindsay, you're up.
All right. Thanks for the trailers. Those are three really good, solid trailers. And these are three good, solid, like meaty films. I was excited to see all three of these. Let's just start with some basics. John, The Road Up, why don't you talk a little bit about how that was a film that you started to make? How did this become an interest for you, and how did this film come to be?
Sure. Well, we like to say that sometimes we pursue a documentary, and sometimes the documentary pursues us. And in this case, an acquaintance of ours, one of the co-producers on the film, Amy, knew some people affiliated with the CARA program in Chicago. And this friend of hers who is connected to CARA was saying that he had thought that there was a worthwhile documentary, that someone should do a film about CARA and the subjects and clients that they work with. And she said, I know some guys who make documentaries, I can approach them. And so she came to us and we met with the organization and, began the process of investigating the CARA program and how we might go about telling that story. And, from the beginning, as we, entered into the spaces and different aspects of the CARA program, every step of the way, it just became a story and a subject that we knew we wanted to tell. They begin every day with a program called Morning Motivations, where the community comes together and shares aspects of their lives in this just very open and honest way, and where the community is just so incredibly supportive. And just being a part of that, seeing that, hearing the stories that they were telling, we knew we wanted to make the documentary. So that's really the kind of the genesis of it.
Excellent. I'm glad you did. It shone a light on a program I would have otherwise never heard about. I'm glad that I know about it. Rita and Miles, Burn Girl was a very different kind of documentary, but still had a lot of really heavy topics to it. Why don't you talk about how you came to do this documentary?
Hey, hello to everybody. It's great to be here. Burn Girl really started about 40 years ago when I inherited a little money from my grandma's last remaining relative in Ireland, and my sister and I used that money to go to Ireland, and it just started a process of unraveling a story that I didn't even know was there. And so then 6 years ago, my niece said, Rita, you've been doing all this work and building relationships for all these years. You have a 1,200-year story to tell that no one knows, and no one has all the pieces of it. You have it. So you have to do something with this. So we started out, and it went on from there. And then we got a grant 3 years ago. And at that point, I brought producer Melody Gilbert in on what we thought was a film, one film, and it became two films. And they're both in the film festival. The Stories I Didn't Know is the other part of this. It's the Minnesota part of the story. It's a family history story. But what happened at that point is we finished Stories I Didn't Know. That was the Minnesota part that had to do with the Dakota connection between my family and what happened in Minnesota when the European Americans came in and took over the land. But then at the end, when that film was done last spring, then I said to Miles and the rest of the crew, do you want to go back and finish the Ireland part of the story? And they were available. And thanks to Miles, we had 20 minutes, but we didn't really have a film at that point. And now I'll hand it over to you, Miles, to explain what happened then.
Sure. Hello, everybody, and it is a pleasure to be here. So I first met Rita in the tail end of 2018 when I got brought on to make the documentary that she was just describing, Stories I Didn't Know. And the process of making Burn Girl was going back through a lot of the assembly reels and a lot of the rough cuts that we made for that film before it made its dramatic shift into focusing on a lot of verite footage that we shot during 2019. So that left on the table a lot of this footage relating to Rita's family history in Ireland and this historical story. But as Rita was saying, it only was about 25 minutes or so of story. And so the real challenge was trying to find something that could stretch it out to be an hour and make it worthwhile to spend the time not only going into Rita's personal family history, but weaving that into something that felt like it had more of a significance within the history of Ireland itself, and then like Irish people. So that essentially that was the challenge of writing Burren Girl. And it was my pleasure to be able to edit both films, but I had a little bit of a different role on this one, in the sense that I didn't shoot any of it. I just did essentially like a rewrite of old versions of scenes from stories I didn't know into this new story that took the history of Davern Law School and kind of really brought it into the forefront.
Definitely. And for anybody in the audience who has not seen Stories I Didn't Know, there really isn't, it's not like two films that tell the same story. It really is two films that tell two different parts of the same story. So if you haven't seen one, you should definitely see it. If you've seen just one and not the other, you should definitely see both parts of that. There's some of the same players, but two very different parts of the story. So John Nichols and Morgan, the big scary S word. There was so much information in this documentary. It just blew my mind. I watched it at least twice, and then I watched it again last night because I was afraid there was stuff I had missed, and there definitely is. So much information in an hour and a half. Tell me how this came to be made and how you decided to present this. This was so dense.
Morgan, why don't you go first? All right, I will. Hi, John. I'm filling in at the last minute for Yael, who directed the film. She has her daughter assaulted her and mauled her eye, so she's unable to be here. But I'm a poor substitute for her. But I will say that we started talking about this movie sort of right around the end of the first Bernie Sanders campaign and Trump's victory. In that time frame, and looking at sort of an electoral landscape that offered only like complete despair, and with the exception of the fact that the Sanders campaign had really ignited this sort of new socialist movement in the United States that seemed to call back to something earlier, to the Debs moment in the early 20th century, and that had really been extinguished in this country for decades as any kind of real going political concern. In fact, I don't know if we can all probably remember during the Obama years how much he ran away from that word as if it were, terrorist or something equally toxic. So, seeing that there was this sort of new and growing movement, largely of young people, was maybe a place to look. Something to be in 2017. So yeah, that's when we started making the film. But it's great to be in a Wisconsin Film Festival, because Wisconsin plays a real an enormous role in the film. Probably thanks to Don's generosity in such a unique social.
Still there, Morgan?
I disappeared. I'm back. Am I back?
You did. You're back. Okay.
Okay, good. But that was right when I was going to say, John. That was about. Do you want to talk about some of that history?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And thanks, Morgan. It was a pleasure to work with Morgan and with Yael and the other folks. About a decade ago, I wrote a book called The S Word, and it was a history of socialism in America. And its argument, of course, is that, as we say in the film, socialism is deeply rooted in this country. And it's especially a pleasure to be discussing this at a Wisconsin Film Festival, even if it's right on the border with Illinois, because Wisconsin is really one of the places where socialism has its deepest roots in the United States. And so in this film, we go up to Ripon, Wisconsin, where the Republican Party was founded, and note, I think for the first time in any documentary, the many socialists who were involved in forming the Republican Party back in 1854, visiting the socialist communal project there, the phalanx that was just on the edge of town, and then going over to the little white schoolhouse where the Republican Party was formed, and literally going through the names of the people who were part of that socialist project. And do a lot of that in the film. That's one of the geniuses of this film, is the history unfolds a lot of what people don't know, but should, about the very American roots of democratic socialism. And then in the genius of the filmmakers, they bring it up to the current moment. And so you see people operating right now, bringing this long American tradition very much into the contemporary moment. And I think the great contribution of the film, if I can, is to suggest that many of the people who yell and scream about how horrible socialism is and how foreign it is don't know their own country's history. And that's especially true in Wisconsin, because of course, Milwaukee, as Alice Cooper reminded us, is a city that had 3 socialist mayors into the early 1960s. And so the greatest success story in American socialism was Milwaukee, and the city's great strengths, which we explore in the film, are testaments to what democratic socialism contributed to this country. And I think that if you see that beautiful waterfront in Milwaukee, which the socialists fought to keep open and available to all people, you understand a little bit more about the democratic socialist premise in the past and frankly to the present.
Definitely, definitely. You've got quite a political background. You have written a lot. Have your views changed? Has doing these films, have they changed your views, or is this generally just a continuation of, are these reconfirming your beliefs, or is making these documentaries just changing you in some way?
Is this a question for me or for each of us?
That was for you, John, specifically, based mostly on your history of writing.
This film is exciting, and it was a pleasure to see. And remember, the work was done by Morgan and Yael and these other folks. I was honored to be able to participate in it and be associated with it in some minor ways, but they did the hard work. And I think they confirmed a lot of my views that something big is happening in America. We're opening up our discussion about ideology. That's on the left and the right, but this country is having broader discussions than it used to have. And that's a healthy thing, especially if we put it in some historical context. And look, I'm old enough, luckily, to have known the last socialist mayor of Milwaukee, Frank Zeidler, who was a wonderful, charming man. And I think the film captures some of his history. I believe his daughter was interviewed for it, among others. And I'll just, better than anything else, I'll tell a quick Frank Zeidler story and just say that Frank Zeidler was the mayor of Milwaukee, which at that time was one of the 20 largest cities in the United States, for 12 years, from 1948 to 1960. When he finished as mayor, they had a big ceremony to swear in the new mayor, and it was a very festive event. And a woman who had, come to see the event came on the bus, and she saw the new mayor sworn in, and then she went out to the bus stop. It was a rainy, cold April day in Wisconsin, and she sat down to wait for the bus. And this old man came along, not that old at that time, really, with a box, just a little box of stuff. And he sat down next to her, and he was wearing a plain tan raincoat and holding his little box. And she looked over and she said, "You're Mayor Zeidler." And she said, "Yeah." He said, yeah. And he says, you're taking the bus? And he says, "Yeah, I don't drive cars. Socialists ride the bus."
Sounds about right. You avail yourself of the system, if you believe in it, you definitely use it. So I usually don't do really complex questions, but I couldn't help but notice that these 3 films have a distinct commonality that I personally really enjoyed. None of them there was a complexity to the characters in them, in that there is not really a good guy and a bad guy. There was a really kind of satisfying depth. John, the road up, you have these people that the care program is helping up, but it isn't just like, poor girls with a heart of gold. And, I mean, these are people with deeply difficult backgrounds, and that leads to deeply difficult presents and sometimes deeply difficult futures. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about what it's like to do a documentary where you're attempting to tell a story about something that is so complex?
Sure. Yeah, I think, for us, it's the key in telling this story with all of our documentaries is really building that relationship, building that trust with our subjects, and, being allowed to have access to tell that story is, built upon that trust. And, I think we do that by spending lots of time, even without bringing a camera into it, just getting to know the subjects. And in exploring this world, yeah, all of the characters and subjects that we follow come from very different backgrounds, different ways that they found themselves coming to the care program, some through the criminal justice system, some through referrals from homeless shelters, some through church groups or friends referring them. But everybody has a unique story to tell. And for us, building that trust and being allowed to tell that story was just an incredible honor for us. And we didn't want to simplify it. We wanted to present it in all of its complexity, and I think we achieved that and did our best to honor our subjects in that way. So
yeah, I think you definitely did. Out of curiosity, I know in the film we saw there were a couple of people who were like, I'm not going to make that mistake again, and then they did. I'm not going to steal again. I'm not going to drink again. I'm not going to, but they do. That's a human thing. And I thought you treated that with a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, Jesse talks about in the film that, we are not our mistakes. These are complex individuals, and the road up is not just a simple road up. It's a road up, down, sideways, around, in circles, and the journey continues for all of the subjects that we followed. So yeah, it's yeah.
It makes for a better story, I think. Rita and Miles, you would have had the same situation, and you portrayed that pretty clearly. You had people that you had seen in your own family as the good guys, and then as the story went on, you realized in someone else's story they're not the good guys. They took the land. They displaced the people. You understand what I'm saying? Did you have a hard time with that? Because some of those people were your grandfather, your family. Was it hard to make that shift from, my grandpa's an awesome dude who like owns an island to maybe that wasn't exactly how it went?
Did you want to talk about stories I didn't know here too? Is that?
They kind of bleed into each other.
Okay, great.
A little bit. So feel free to draw the line where you want to. And if you're like, no, I'm not going to talk about that story here, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the core of it, is what happens when you uncover your own history that you didn't know, and it's good and it's bad, and it's your own family that that we're talking about. So it is very tricky, and there's things that are very sensitive to bring up, and some people don't want you to bring them up, and so that plays out in stories I didn't know in my own family when they find out that there is a story about what happened about the land that my great-grandfather settled on, and that it was very sacred to Dakota people, and that in order for him to purchase that land, it had to have been taken. So the whole story is about that. And then I meet a woman, a Dakota woman, whose ancestors were there in 1862, as were mine, and we share our stories. So it's the storytelling is the healing, I guess, in many times in documentary films. So it's a real honor to bring a story to an audience and see what happens to them because of it, you know, see what it tweaks.
Definitely.
Miles, did you have anything else to add?
Sure. I would just add that I think in both films, but in Burn Girl, you know, especially strongly, what comes across is that there's a deep complexity in and history of like injustice in history itself, and what Rita's work has shown, and what I've learned from working on it and from viewing it and discussing it with people, is that human connections that are built now in the present time are a really powerful way in order to kind of like jumpstart the process of healing and reconciliation. And so in the case of both films, Burn Girl in the sense of like British colonialism and the history of the island of Ireland and how that plays out in terms of the Davern clan and Rita's ancestors. And then in Stories I Didn't Know, how Rita's more immediate ancestors and the purchase and then sale of Pike Island plays out relative to the history of the Dakota War. There's obviously not any way to get around accountability in terms of like the raw facts of history and, you know, injustices that happened. But the way in which both films show the process of healing through personal connection in the present is something that really taught me a lot. So that's what I would offer as far as a comment in terms of like a gray area between like heroes and villains or whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I always there's always a reckoning that happens at a certain age where you learn that it's not black and white. And you know, while I'm the good guy in my own story, in someone else's I may not be. I might, you know, have some gray or maybe even be a villain. And you kind of have to come to terms with that, and that's part of connecting with other people. So John and Morgan, your characters are well, the subjects, I guess, are complex in a slightly different way. Which is less of an internal way and more of an externally viewed way. Right now, socialism is very much a word that people have a lot of feelings about. So while you present the people in your film, you know, just as basically their political opinion, you, I would imagine, have come across a number of people who are like, I'm absolutely not going to look at that because that is just propaganda or whatever. Did you deal with a lot of that, or have you tried to stay away from that? And how did you address it if it came up?
Well, we had a lot of conversation in making this film about who our audience was, who we were aiming the film at, and you know, we sort of arrived at this place where there are people who are already socialists who probably know a lot of this history already and are on their own sort of path with a lot of it. And then there are people who think that, you know, anything, you know, that if you give everyone free healthcare as they have in most countries, that you're automatically going to, you know, be putting people in gulags the following week. And really trying to make a movie for that audience, I think is not really, I don't know, it doesn't feel, if people come to our film and they come in an open-minded way, I think they might learn something. But we really settled on trying to make this movie for people who, you know, maybe are sort of in the Democratic Party, you know, but think of radical or too extreme, and you know, trying to sort of bring out these elements of what democratic socialism in this country has always been, which are really just about fighting for bread and butter issues for the great majority of Americans, and trying to make it feel, trying to make people understand that this is not something that is about, you know, I think people think when you talk about socialism that you're talking about Soviet communism and that you're talking about, you know, surrendering national sovereignty to some distant, you know, Svengali type figure. And, you know, that is not what this is. That's not what socialism ever was in the US. And that's certainly not what 21st century socialism is going to be. Once we settled on that audience,
John, did you want to offer anything at the end of that, or?
I'll pick up on that a little bit and just say that I think that's actually one of the things the film does really well is speak about the contemporary debate on socialism, the contemporary thinking about it, and put it into a little bit of perspective. That's how you bring the history in. And the history becomes so powerful, as our other filmmakers have spoken about, because then it shows us a complexity that I think a lot of people don't know. And at a moment when there are so many people trying to figure this word out, figure out what it means for them, a film that looks at the contemporary arguments, looks at the contemporary advocacy, and then takes you back, I think it is in a sense very welcoming. It suggests to people that you can start to think about this word in different ways. Doesn't necessarily mean that you will embrace a democratic socialist model. You may or may not. That's where people will end up. But what it does do, I think, at this point, is that it demystifies and perhaps makes the word less frightening, at least to some folks. And that's important because this film was made, and Morgan can correct me on some of the timeline, but overwhelmingly, obviously, it was filmed before the pandemic. And it was a lot of the production work done, you know, into the last stages there, right at the start of the pandemic. But this is something that came from before a point where the United States was hit with a massive healthcare crisis, a massive economic downturn, all the challenges related to the pandemic. And its response was to go for a lot of government, to, you know, give people money in the form of direct payments, to increase unemployment benefits, to make healthcare free, at least to the point of getting tests and getting vaccines. And so suddenly a lot of what had historically been called socialist and somehow seen as scary was recognized as necessary. And that's really the point where we're at now as a country. And the question is, once we've recognized that some of these approaches are necessary, can we now begin to see where there may be opportunities and there may be possibilities? Again, not necessarily to embrace every aspect of socialism. That's what people are going to have to decide for themselves. We are a democracy. But to recognize that if you do so, you're not necessarily touching a third rail or doing something that is so dangerous and destructive that, as Morgan suggests, it'll end you up in a gulag. And so I think the film does a real service in that regard.
Yeah, it definitely did. I appreciated a lot of the history because so much of what you hear about socialism now is simply based on the fact that it is a current hot button word. And so you hear these definitions slapped on it, and then as you look into it, you're like, well, that isn't actually socialism. That's, you know, a dictatorship, or that's fascism, or that's, you know, something else. And these words kind of lose meaning just from the sheer overuse in public life. You kind of just lose all the actual meaning from it. It's just, this is a word that makes me feel this way, and this is what I know. And so I think that did do, like you said, a good job of demystifying everything around that. So John, when you were filming The Road Up, what was the moment that you knew you had gotten the film that you were setting out to make? The moment you knew you got it right?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I guess, I don't know, you know, I think from very early on, you know, once we started entering into transformations, you know, watching Jesse do his work, hearing his story, knowing that that classroom environment was going to be kind of the framework on which we would tell all these other stories, I think we felt we had something really special. And as we immersed ourselves in the class and got to know the 4 subjects that we ultimately followed for about 2 years after the class, I think we felt like, yeah, we knew we had it in the classroom, and then following them for that 2-year period. But I guess if there was a scene or a moment, as difficult as it was to film, I would have to say that when Clarence has to leave the program, being in that room with Clarence and Jesse, again, speaks to the trust that we had established, but also the generosity of both of those men in allowing the camera to be there and to not be there, because it just plays out in this just very real, raw way.
Yeah, I'm very aware of the scene that you're talking about, and it did, and it came across to the viewer as well, that this was maybe one of the most difficult things about this program, is that some people are not going to become the person that you were hoping and live the life that you wanted, or that, you know, maybe they should have, maybe the life that they deserve. Just past habits are powerful, and sometimes it's very hard to escape those.
Absolutely. But, you know, as Jesse says, and as you see with Tamala, she comes back to the program, at least through reaching out to Jesse. I think that the lessons that are imparted in that classroom stay with these individuals. And so if it doesn't take immediately upon graduation, it'll kick in at some later point, you know, that there are opportunities every day to get back on track, and I hope that for Clarence.
Yeah, I definitely do too.
Yeah.
Rita and Miles, at what point did you know that you had the film that you had set out to make? Or did you not have the film you set out to make? Did you realize you had a different film?
Well, I think for me it was about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months into filming when I had brought Melody Gilbert on, who's an experienced documentary producer and director, and really, really, really smart. And this was my first film, right? So I was very dependent on her. And at some point she said she tried hard to follow the film I thought I was making. And then one day she just said, Rita, we're not making a film about your dead grandma. We're making a film about you. And we're going to follow you on this journey and find out what is underneath this passion you have for your family history, and what's sitting there that that, you know, is going to come out when we follow you. So that was really the turning point. And I was very unhappy. I was really mad about it. And I had to decide whether to pull the plug and quit or trust Melody and follow her. And I decided to trust her, and I did. And then at the very end of that film, you know, I had the opportunity to go back and make the other one too. So I just had the best of both worlds. And the second one, the moment was when Miles came up with a script, because I didn't know how on earth we were going to find a storyline for Burren Girl, and he found it. And so there was a moment there too. Over to you, Miles.
Yeah. Yeah. So for I totally understand what you're saying, John, about witnessing something and capturing it in the moment, and it being so powerful that as you're processing it later, you realize that, like, you know, you can further investigate this and build a project around it, and that you've captured this like kernel that will grow out to a project. Whereas Burren Girl is more like you have all these different elements of like Rita's life and Irish history and in terms of like the writing of it, it was like looking at them all out in my head, and like as if it was like a post-it board of like all these things that seemed like they were obviously connected in some ways that were like too literal but not emotional, or like emotional but people might not get it, or et cetera, all the way down the line. And for me, like the thing that tied it all together was I took like an extra day and did a deep dive looking back into all the stuff that Rita had shot and some additional research on the Davern Law School in this document, Egerton 88. And as I was like thinking about it and writing to it, I ended up with what essentially became like in my head, at least as the writer, the secret of expanding it to like a full 60-minute piece was that here you had this document that was produced by the Davern Law School, like the namesake of Rita's Irish clan and her ancestors. And it was physically removed from Ireland by, the forces of colonization. And its return back to Ireland represents that history coming back and being something that's like tangible and something that the people in Ireland, whether they are descended from the Daverns or not, can interact with in a way that like I said, is tangible. And I think that emotionally and thematically that relates very much to Rita's uncovering of the story of her grandmother, Anne. And the way in which Anne's story is shared by many, many other people's family history in America. But when you go through and tell just one person's specific life story, there's an intensity to really looking at like the humanity of just one person's life and one person's existence, and a little bit of the well, not a little bit, but I think a lot of the like emotional and thematic weight of being able to tie all these different parts of the story together in like kind of that post-it board note of ideas I described was the fact that there was like there's a thematic resonance of like this document and Rita's story. And as I narrowed in on that, it started helping me figuring out other ways of writing the movie and like what related and what didn't to what would actually like make this story relatable on a personal level. Because I'll tell you right now, if we started from the beginning, like the Davern Law School was founded and blah, 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 like it would not tug at people's heartstrings.
Yep, no, you did a terrific job of that. I think you got it just right. So John and Morgan, at what point did you realize that you had made the documentary that you intended to make, the moment when you got it right? Morgan, you're still muted.
Phrases that one of those phrases that no one ever said last year, and now it's part of the parlance. You're still muted. I think with our film, the real question was what the emotional through line was going to be, how people were going to connect to it emotionally, because in a certain way, you're making a movie about macroeconomic policy, or this sort of set of abstractions that, and you don't really have a place to point the camera where you can see, hey, socialism. Certainly not one that's not contentious, and certainly not one that's in the United States where we really wanted to focus our story. So I would say that I didn't really know that we had the movie we wanted to make until the first time I watched one of the really fine cut edits all the way through and actually got to the end. And I think there's a moment where Bernie shows up at a fundraiser for one of our characters, one of our subjects, Lee Carter, and he has that line. And we really didn't feature him much in the movie, even though he's such a kind of like inspiration for a lot of this sort of contemporary movement. But he has that line just about the need for us to raise our expectations. And I had watched all of these cuts a million times, but that was the one where I was watching at that time. I actually I was extremely moved by it. I really welled up just at that thought that like this small adjustment that this new sort of democratic socialist movement is making to people's conception of what's possible. We've been so beaten down over the last 50 years of deindustrialization and the destruction of unions, that our expectations have become genuinely paltry. And the idea that Medicare for All, which is extremely popular now, people didn't dare to ask for that in this country because it was thought that was asking for that we could collectively band together and take care of each other, that was somehow, that was off the table, and now it's on the table again. And I find that, when I knew that, but when I watched our movie and I felt that was when I sort of felt like, okay, we've actually made something here.
Since I wrote the book, I've been approached by or participated in about a half dozen documentaries about democratic socialism in the United States, and some of them have come out really well. Mike Goucher, from longtime TV personality in Milwaukee, who's now at Marquette Law School, did a documentary on Milwaukee socialism that was really quite brilliant. It was wonderfully done, and I was very honored to be a part of it. And that got a great pickup on PBS stations across the country, and so heard from a lot of people about that. And then participated in a number of others with other folks. But what struck me about this one, and I obviously, because Morgan's the one who had to decide, what went in it and how it worked, and Yael as well. What struck me was, in watching this, what worked was the wonderful blend of the contemporary and the past. And that is not an easy thing to do. It's a balance you have to strike, where you use the history. You're not making a historical documentary. You use the history as a tool to amplify the discussion about what's going on now. And when I watched this film, I was struck by how very well that was done. And I'll tell you that of the documentaries that have been done on democratic socialism up to this point that I've seen, this is the most complete. This is the one that kind of touches all the bases and does it in what I think of as the right way, and the one that I think will have staying power for a long time beyond this moment. And I'll note that some of the people who are featured in the film are off to doing some pretty exciting things right now. Lee Carter is running for governor of Virginia, an uphill race to be sure, but he's doing it. And Bernie Sanders is now the chair of the Senate Budget Committee. And AOC seems to be going from strength to strength. But so many of the folks who are grassroots activists, who are doing work that this film amplified and kind of brought up, are stepping into real leadership roles in their unions, in their communities, in their states. And I have a feeling that folks will come back to this film again and again and see those elements of it, those human elements, the people who weren't famous going in, but who were captured as they were beginning work that may well be definitional for years, decades, even generations to come. So I think this film worked. And I am in a happy position of not having any responsibility for it except being a participant. And so hopefully I can say that honestly.
I just want to say, John, just want to say thank you, John, for all those nice things you just said. But I also just want to say the blending of the history and the contemporary is entirely a testament to Yael's skill as a documentarian. I just want to, I know she's not here, but I just wanted to give her the credit that she's due for that. It is her fault.
If you would please extend our best wishes for her recovery also. Just tell her we're thinking of her.
Can I just tell you, I talked to her this afternoon. I know Morgan may have talked to her more recently, but just to clarify, her daughter's a baby, right? Yeah. So this was this mauling was an unintentional act by a very small child who was just reaching out to mom and hit the wrong place. And it's all going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And I know Yael was really excited about this. And so, I saw no winnowing or lessening of her maternal instinct as a result of this brief incident.
Yeah, they make babies cute for a reason.
That's right.
I appreciated these three films because of the different flavors of hope. Whether you're watching The Road Up and you have hope for transcending a difficult past, you're watching Burren Girl and it gives you hope for kind of a reckoning and a folding in of what came before and what's coming after, and how you view the people in your life and the people around you, whether it's the big scary S word providing a hope for supporting each other as people, and a hope for maybe someday having a solid support of government, someone where you don't just say, well, that's what politicians do. You know, they're useless and we pay them and they get rich and they go home. You know, I really thought especially during this time where there seems to not be a ton of hope. I'm here in Illinois where it's been below zero for quite some time. I could use all the hope I can get. So I loved these three films. We're going to probably round out our time here pretty shortly, but let me ask you before you go, John, if you were going to pitch The Road Up, give me your best elevator pitch for someone who hasn't seen your film. Just give me something, a quick line. What would you tell someone?
Well, I love what you just said. You know, as Jesse says in the film, without hope, there's nothing. And that is the bedrock upon which Kara does its work, bringing hope and restoring hope back in the lives of people who have felt hopeless. Elevator pitch for the film, it's about individuals who have made mistakes but are not to be defined by their mistakes, reaching out and trying to get their lives back on track. And it's a very hopeful and positive film, despite dealing with some very heavy material.
Excellent, excellent pitch. Rita, Miles, what would you say to someone who has not seen your film? Give me your elevator pitch.
Sure. Imagine growing up with this blank in your life about your own past, past maybe your grandparents, and then to be able to uncover it and find the place and the people and this rich cultural history that you didn't even know was there. It changes you in ways that make your life better. And it's been an honor to get to do that and then to get to share it. How about you, Miles?
Miles, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. I would say Burn Girl is a movie about understanding the ways in which history shapes your past and how you can use it to forge relationships in the present.
I have to tell you both, Ireland is one of my favorite places on earth, and I haven't been there for probably 12 years, 13, 14 maybe. It was absolutely wonderful to see the landscape there again because I did love it so much. And it just has a light and a greenness and that really no place else on earth has. So thank you for that. That was fantastic. So John and Morgan, give me John, maybe you're gonna pitch your book, but go ahead and give me your best elevator pitch for this documentary. Tell me what you think.
Sure, I'll do my best. Look, I cover politics for a living and I deal with it a lot. And usually it is dispiriting and disappointing and people are frustrated by it. This is a film where people are excited and hopeful and believe that politics is about love and solidarity as opposed to just clawing your way to the top. And so if by some chance you want to see a film about politics and economics that might actually make you feel good, this is it.
So much better than I could ever hope to do. But I think I'm going to steal one of your words, John, and just say I think this is a film that does try to demystify a very heavily contested word in American political life. Not necessarily to persuade you that this is the right way to go, but to invite you into some of these ideas and some of your own history as an American that has really been forgotten and covered up. So yeah, that's terrible. That was a terrible elevator pitch.
Great pitch.
I've never done it. I've never done an elevator pitch. This is my first time. Be gentle.
It's all right. You can practice, and then next time you're back at the festival, you'll have another one. It'll be all right. I'll ask you the same question again.
I'll do better next time.
I see Sabrina is back with us. Hey, Sabrina.
Thank you. I want to just, we're at time here and we've kind of gone over. I think when you guys originally asked me how long, I did not, I think, expect an hour, which is great. I want to thank each one of you for your films, for being a part of our festival, and for coming here tonight and answering all these questions and being part of this conversation. You know, Lindsay kind of went over everything, but your films have a very touching meaning, I think, in different ways for different people. So thank you for all of them.
Thank you.
So I think we are done.
Can I just interject real quick?
Yes.
Because we don't normally at a film festival, you get to see an audience and get to engage with them. I just want to thank, and I'll let the others do it I'll be real quick. Thank the audience for watching our films and for engaging with them, and for supporting the Beloit Film Festival. Thank you for having our film. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And I hope next year you guys will come back with different projects and we will be in person. It is, you know, Beloit this time of year. Yeah, it's cold in Wisconsin, but it is a different atmosphere. That is one thing I think most of us are missing, but hopefully we still gave people a feel, at least seeing you on a screen. So
when you come to the festival, it's the warmest place on earth. So
that is actually very true. It is a very true statement. So
that's a good elevator pitch.
Yes, exactly.
There you go. I think we're going to put that on all our brochures now going forward. Lindsay, thank you very much. So thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
I can't wait to see
you.
both of your films.
Well, you guys.
Likewise to both of you. Yes.
Do it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Larry.
Thank you.